In 2016, director Denis Villeneuve and star Amy Adams gave the world a tense and introspective sci-fi drama.
In 2022, we escaped the clutches of Scotland to return to America to try a fan-favorite brand.
The film is Arrival.
The whiskey is Woodford wheat.
And we'll review them both. This is
the Film and Whiskey Podcast. Welcome to the Film and Whiskey Podcast, where each week we review a classic movie and a glass of whiskey. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And this week we are looking at Denis Villeneuve's 2016 film Arrival. Brad, this is a movie from your season 5 list. We are nearing the end of season 5. I think I've got 2 movies left. I think you've got this one and one more. And then we've got a Harry Potter, and we are done for the season.
Bob, I think that it had just been way too long since we hung out with our boy Denis.
Yeah.
So we had to get him on this season.
I gotta just go ahead and call you out at this point because I've kind of raked you over the coals for it, but I told you on like many occasions, dude, you gotta go to the movie theater and you have to see Dune before it leaves theaters. Like, it is Denis Villeneuve with the biggest budget he's ever had making an awesome sci-fi movie. Like, there, that should check every Brad G box. And you were like, all right, yeah, I'll try to get around to it. And you missed it, man.
Dude, all I have to say is this. There is zero chance that movie does not come back into theaters at some point in our lifetime.
I mean, maybe, but like... I think it's going to be way harder to get you to go to like the 20th anniversary showing that happens for one day.
When we're on season like 52 of the show.
It'll be like Survivor.
Oh man, dude, if I can remain irrelevant as long as Jeff Probst has, then I'm doing something right.
All right, so of the Denis Villeneuve movies that you have seen, because we know that Dune is not one of them, I have to imagine this ranks pretty highly because, like I said, this came off of your list. And rewatching this movie, Brad, because I hadn't watched it since I saw it in the theater, I gotta say that I'm kind of surprised that this would be a movie that appealed to Brad G. Like, it is a very, like you said, introspective, kind of slow-moving film, and it really takes its time. And so I'd like to hear, like,
I love your subtle digs.
I'm not even trying to be subtle.
Movie.
I'm not even trying to be subtle about it.
Like, smart and intelligent. He wouldn't love things like that.
What I've realized is that when you pick the slow moving film, you're like, oh, it's introspective. When I pick the slow moving film, you're like, this is boring. Boring as hell. Why would you ever pick this? Jesse James? Boo.
I don't know what movie you're referring to, Bob.
So we're going to move on from there. But seriously, tell me, like, what is it that draws you to this film?
Partially, it's the score.
Nice.
I just love this movie.
Is this
score.
a Johan Johansson score?
It is a Johan Johansson score. Yeah, there's this weird, like, Swedish electronica artist that I will occasionally listen to, and I can't think of his name at the moment. But when I first saw this movie, I would have sworn up and down that, like, the final song that it's very prominent at the end of the movie, but it kind of plays throughout. I could have sworn that it was one of his songs, and I was, like, really pumped about that. But all that going to say, I think the music in this movie is freaking fantastic, and we need more Swedish, Norwegian, like, weird
Swedish representation needed in film scores.
We do, man, because it's spectacular.
All right, so that's one thing. What else?
That's one thing. I think what really draws me in with this movie is the way it uses language as a tool. And I think that it rewards multiple viewings because you just kind of pick up on little things that you didn't see before. And even like the opening line of the movie is, I used to think that this was the beginning of your story. And like even that little twist, like when you first walk out of the theaters, you don't remember that was the first line of the movie. But when you watch it a second time, it's just kind of like it just sits there, and you're like, oh wait, this isn't the start of the story because time travel and you see it in the future, and do you get it?
The spoiler alarm is going off right now. We have not not given our fans the spoiler warning they deserve yet.
That is true. How popular would you say Arrival was? Like what percentage of Film and Whiskey Nation do you think has seen this movie?
Oh, I would say it's moderately popular. Like I don't think
so. Like 40%. The nation?
Well, like even comparing it to Villeneuve's other movies, like Prisoners made okay money at the box office, but it was like a long drama. And then Sicario came out, didn't do great at the box office, but then everyone caught it on Netflix and on video and everything else, and they were like, "Oh, this is a great movie." So I feel like tons of people have seen Sicario
on video, on their VHS.
You know what? Can I rant for like 30 seconds?
Yeah, go for it, man.
I don't understand why Redbox is failing as a business model. Because like the way movies are working now is that they put a movie in theaters for like 3 weeks. And then while it's still in theaters, they're releasing it to digital. And you can rent it digitally for like $9. And then if you wait like another 3 weeks, they're like, no one buys DVDs anymore. Let's just put it in Redbox. And so while it's still like $6 or $8 to rent it on whatever streaming platform you want to rent it from, you could go to your nearest grocery store or gas station and get it for $1. And I just don't understand how like we have reached a point as Americans where we are so lazy that like you can't just go get the Blu-ray for $1 and you'd rather like spend the $9 to watch it with Amazon Prime or whatever.
Bob, I think that you thinking that America couldn't get any lazier.
that was the fatal flaw.
It's like thinking fat bastard couldn't eat another chicken wing.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
I appreciate it though, man. I'm with you, dude. You would think that the idea of saving money would be like a good impetus to go out and rent it for $1. But I guess I'll say is this. I've watched many of my young friends spend like $9 to get one cheeseburger and a fry from Wendy's, and it's just so that it can be delivered to them.
Yep.
And like, if there's anything that ages me faster, it's probably the fact that I just don't understand the Grubhub, like food being delivered to you craze. I'm like, listen, man, somebody gave me, when we had Sadie, somebody gave me a $25 gift card and to Grubhub. And Haley and I were like, man, let's get some like B-dubs. Right. So like I got like a sandwich, it was $10. Haley got some wings, it was like $8. We're like, all right, it's like $18, $19. We ended up spending money.
Oh, for sure.
It ended up costing like $30 to get our $18 order delivered to us. I was so pissed.
Oh man. Yeah. We are a lazy people. All that to say, I think probably like 40% of our audience has seen Arrival. I would say 40.
All right. So spoiler alert.
For that thing we said 4 minutes ago.
Yeah, I would say this is a really good movie that you should go to Redbox and rent. Are we gonna like die on the hill of Redbox?
I am. Bob? I love Redbox.
Every week, it's gonna be like the whiskey segment. Would you recommend buying or Redboxing?
Oh, that's great. All right, one more thing before we get into Brad Explains, because this is just a weird episode already, and I'm going to lean into it. I got to say that I have started identifying a pattern with the Brad G selections this season. And, my pattern is very obvious and right there at the top of everyone's minds. That's always the father-son dynamic.
Yeah.
But in the last few picks, Brad, you have had The Prince of Egypt and now this movie. And so you are really leaning into the dead children motif. I've got strained parental relationships. You've got dead kids. So,
Bob, I think that 2 out of 15 movies does not a theme make.
I might be reaching, but
just a little bit. It's just that the wheel of fate put them next to each other.
It sure did, man. And this movie just starts off with a dead kid. It's like, hey, welcome to this alien movie. Hope you enjoy this image.
Cancer.
Yeah.
Childhood cancer.
Yikes. All right. Well, on that note,
man.
let's segue very abruptly into Brad Explains.
But just as abruptly, we're going to segue into
A segue.
an important announcement. Bob, you have an important announcement, right?
I always have the important announcements. We just want to say that whether you're joining us for the first time today or if you're a long-time listener, please be sure to go check out our Patreon at patreon.com/filmwhiskey, where you can become a member for as little as $3 a month. We do have 3 different tiers of membership, and at every tier, you get some sort of perk. You'll get access to our Discord, which we're on every single day, interacting with members of Film and Whiskey Nation. And if you pledge at the $7 level, you get bonus episodes. Every single week, we do an after show where we talk about the movie for a little bit longer. We ask a discussion question that's pretty fun. Today, we're going to talk about whether or not aliens are real and what we would do if we ever encountered them. So if you'd like to hear that kind of bonus content, make sure to sign up at the $7 tier. But whatever you're able to pledge, we'd love it if you could check us out on patreon.com/filmwhiskey. All right, Brad, let's jump into Brad Explains. This is the part of the podcast where Brad breaks down the plot of the movie that he has just seen, often for the first time. Brad, you've got 60 seconds on the clock. Can you break down in a spoilerific fashion the plot of Arrival?
Arrival is a film about the importance of language. You follow Amy Adams' character. Her name is Louise. You follow her. She is a professor of linguistics. When aliens touch down on Earth for the first time, she is brought on by the military as an expert to try and help them communicate with the aliens. There's 12 different landing locations, and through a series of different tactics and ways of engaging with the aliens, they slowly learn this circular language that is offered to them. And in the midst of that, Louise finds her mind changing. She realizes that the process of learning this language is changing how she understands time. And through this, she is able to prevent World War III, essentially. And the weapon that is offered to them is actually language that can help them communicate better. And it's a story about life and loss and the importance of living your life no matter the consequences.
There it is, man.
Boom.
Brad, I think that there are 2 movies that we've done on this podcast that are pretty close cousins to this movie, kind of thematically. And
are they like first cousins or like second cousins once removed?
How far down the family tree are they? But I think the 2 really obvious ones, I guess I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. And I want to tease this because I think this would be a good thing for the second half of the episode. But watching this movie this time, it doesn't work for me. It didn't when I was in the theater, and it doesn't now. And I have a really hard time explaining it. And so I kind of like you to help me parse out why it doesn't work for me, or at least, be a listening ear while you completely disagree.
So I can be like a therapist for you this session.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me how you really feel.
But I realized in trying to explain why this movie doesn't work that I kept coming back to all of my arguments that I made during Chris Nolan's Interstellar.
Hey!
And then I was like, oh, it's because this movie is Denis Villeneuve's Interstellar. And the more I watched towards the end of the film, the more I realized, oh, this is Denis Villeneuve trying to do Christopher Nolan. Like, this is him trying to make a Nolan film, down to the editing at the end of the movie. And I gotta be real with you, I love Denis Villeneuve, and I think that he is one of the finest filmmakers alive, but no one can do Nolan like Nolan. And I think part of what makes this movie a kind of a weird outlier for me in Villeneuve's catalog is that it seems like he's trying really hard to show that he can make a movie like somebody else.
All right, before I go into counselor mode, I'm going to give you one big reason I think this is a better, I don't know if I'd say better movie than Interstellar, just different. 2 hours and 49 minutes and 1 hour and 56 minutes.
Yeah, that's Nolan does need someone to just tell him once in a while, like, you don't need that scene, bud. Like, I
was going to say, because for a drama about aliens and their language, I think that Arrival has the possibility of being too slow, But because it's only 2 hours long, just under, I think that when you mix in the opening part where she's like parsing out her daughter's death, and then you add the end of the film where she's like kind of her heart is racing and she's trying to solve the mystery, I think that you kind of have this movie in 3 parts, and for me, it works really smoothly. But I want to hear more, Bob. Tell me about where the bad movie touched you.
Well, we will we'll press pause on that conversation because I do think this would be a really good kind of back half of the episode discussion. And I want to start with something that I think we can both agree on, and that is Amy Adams.
Dude, she is truly one of my favorite actresses.
Oh, yeah.
Of the modern era. I think that what she's able to do to go from a movie like American Hustle, I think a year or two before this, into this role, she's just a stellar actress.
Mm-hmm. I started watching Enchanted with my kids a few weeks ago because it's just a fun movie. And that was a movie that she was, I know for sure, Golden Globe nominated for. I don't know if she got the Oscar nomination or not for that movie. She deserved a nomination. And the crazy thing about that is that there are probably 1 or 2 maybe other actresses alive that could pull off the role in Enchanted the way she did. Because there's a way to pretend like you're being a princess, and then there's a way to pretend like you're being a Disney princess while also being in on the joke and winking at the camera. And she does it with so much earnestness that it's like it's almost like watching the more heartwarming moments of like Michael Scott on The Office, where Michael Scott's not always aware of Michael Scott's own limitations. And Steve Carell is, in those moments especially, is not making fun of Michael Scott. Like, he's just sincerely being who Michael Scott is. And I think that's like, there's something to that, the way that Amy Adams, Steve Carell, actors like that respect their characters and respect their dignity, that like Amy Adams has always had that. It's just this resolve and this sincerity and this dignity. And it just comes through in everything she does.
Bob, you just used the word that I was going to throw out there. She is sincere in her performance. She's authentic in the way she portrays, this linguist in Arrival. I will say, every time you say, I don't know who else could have played this, it gets my brain to thinking about who could have. Do you think Anne Hathaway could have pulled off Enchanted?
I don't. I think, and I like Anne Hathaway, and she's a more talented vocal performer than Amy Adams is, but I think Anne Hathaway at heart is like a theater kid. Like she just has that kind of showman's mentality. And I think, probably some of the competitiveness too, but like everyone knows, like when you were in high school, the kid who was like really into doing musical theater or whatever. And like, I loved participating in theater, but I wouldn't call myself a theater kid, if that makes sense. Like there's just a certain attitude that those kids have about what they do. And I think that Amy Adams is like, I don't even know if I would say like she's too nice, because I don't know Amy Adams, but there's a level of earnestness that I don't think would come across with Anne Hathaway.
Dude, you know what I watched her in that just utterly terrified me and like shook me to my core?
What, Amy Adams?
Yeah.
What?
Nocturnal Animals.
Dude, you've brought it up a couple times on this show. I think that movie's great. I know you didn't like it, but
I think it was literally the most terrifying thing I've ever watched in my life. Like,
how good is Gyllenhaal though, too? Like,
oh my gosh,
I could watch those two actors you could put them in any movie.
Anything. Absolutely anything. I will say, if we're getting back to Arrival and your Interstellar comparison really quickly, can you just imagine how bad Interstellar would be if you replaced McConaughey with Jeremy Renner?
Thank you for making that. Okay, so great segue. And I'm realizing this about Jeremy Renner. He actually seems like a pretty great guy. Like, from everything I've heard about him, I've never heard a bad story about him. And dude, he seems pretty cool.
Have you ever heard of his like social media
site
app that he tried to start?
His app, the Jeremy Renner app.
Yes.
I feel so bad for him. Like, he got internet bullied into shutting down his own app.
Yes.
So here's the thing, though, is like,
Oh, man.
I remember when he broke through with the Hurt Locker and everybody was like, this guy, right? And then they tried him out in Mission Impossible and you could tell they were going to make him like the bridge. He was going to be the new Mission Impossible guy. And then Tom Cruise was like, no, I'm still doing this. And then he just went away. And then they were like, all right, well, now he's going to be the new Jason Bourne. And then Matt Damon was like, nah, I'm back, bitches. And then they kick Renner out again. And, you know, he does Hawkeye and Hawkeye's thing is like, I don't have sleeves. Like, I think that's like his whole character like wrapped up in. and I think that's kind of like Jeremy Renner to me now. He's a pretty good actor, but every time I see him in something, I just can't help but wonder who else could have done this that isn't Jeremy Renner. And I feel guilty for saying that, but like
he's basically a meme of like generic white action actor.
Yeah. And I think like I just made that phrase up, but I think I don't have sleeves is probably like the vibe he gives in every movie. That's the extent of my character
It's
arc.
like when you go to play pickup basketball at the Y, there's always that one guy who comes in a sleeveless shirt.
Right, not a tank, a sleeveless tee,
a cut off sleeveless tee. Jeremy Renner, everyone.
So yeah, I don't know. Like he's a pretty good actor, but I think this movie would have worked with like 9 other major actors better than with him.
Yeah, I think that if this movie suffers in any way, it's the fact that you never buy into the relationship between Renner and Adams. And the thing is, I hate saying that because I don't even think he did a bad job. I liked him in this movie. He was pleasant. I think he played the role that was written for him well. So, I mean, maybe what I'm griping with is more of the writers.
I agree.
That could have given him a little bit more to do with the film.
I totally agree. And this is where one of the areas where I think the script is like, maybe this is where somebody else came in and touched things up a little bit, but they give him kind of like the George Clooney part. Like he's just sarcastic enough and he's just witty enough that they want him to be the comic relief and they want him to have a little bit of an edge. But to still be really charming. And I think this would be like a perfect Clooney part because that's the way it's written. But then I also feel like they set this character up to fail in so many ways because he's in a different movie than everyone else. Like there's a very somber kind of demeanor about this whole movie. And I understand that like the point is that she's supposed to get attracted to this character because he kind of breaks through that or whatever. But even like they give him a random bit of narration for a while in the middle of the movie, which doesn't really make sense because he never comes back as a narrator. But even in that kind of, few lines that he has in a voiceover, there's a few little jokes thrown in there. And it just it makes it feel like for 5 minutes, you're watching a different film than you're actually watching.
Yeah.
And I think for me that it really did make the whole movie kind of uneven because of the presence of that character.
Yeah, I think that the best way to sum it up is you just can't fit jokes in with like Norwegian orchestra music.
And dead kids. It's just
dead kids.
Really a bad equation.
The sad thing is the moments where he's kind of funny, I genuinely find heartwarming.
Mm-hmm.
And like they are like, and I mean this in just a very simple way, like they're attractive moments. He's just charming.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I still just wonder, like, did we not have enough screen time for him for us to believe that he needed to be that charming? What was it about the movie that I just didn't find myself connecting with Jeremy Renner in a way that was meaningful? Like, I don't know, but by the end of the film, it's like he's just kind of written out like, oh yeah, he just left because he was angry.
Yeah. That
I didn't tell him I could see the future.
Yeah.
So
I don't know, man. Yeah, I have a lot of problems with this movie. It's like it's kind of like Interstellar in that it's like, all right, I respect the big swing and the miss.
Yeah, I think for me, Interstellar is a bigger miss than this movie, but it also swung bigger.
It was a bigger swing. Yeah, for sure.
It was a bigger swing, and so I can respect that. Whereas this movie, I don't think it really missed. Like, I think if anything, this is an example of like a solid leadoff double.
A dinger. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he just kind of dinged it out there. It's a solid hit. For me, like walking out of the film, I was just like, man, that was just fun. And I know it might sound weird to say that a movie with a dead kid and, an hour and a half of talking about language was fun. And another thing that really helped me going into the theater was like, and I think one of the reasons I put this movie on the list for this season is the simple fact that I think that for me, this is a personal story of how important it is to not know anything about a film going into it.
Mm-hmm.
This was an example of like, my friend literally was like, hey, we're going to go watch Arrival. Do you want to come? And I just said, yes. I didn't know anything about the movie. I didn't know who was in it, who directed it. I mean, let's be really honest, man. In 2016, I had no idea about my boy Denis. Literally no clue. Sicario, barely had heard of it. So walking into the movie theater, I just found myself enchanted with the story that he told on screen. And I've always, like, Arrival is the first movie that really struck in me this awareness of, like, I want to watch movies with as little spoiler as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, it holds a special place in my heart for that reason.
And then you want to come on this podcast and spoil it for everyone who hasn't seen it
For
yet.
everyone who hasn't seen it.
Brad, I think this is a good place for us to press pause because I'm like kind of chomping at the bit to jump into what we had reserved for the back half of the episode.
Rip it apart.
So let's drink some wheat whiskey. What do you say?
Let's do it, man. I love me some wheat whiskey.
All right, today we are looking at Woodford Reserve Wheat Whiskey. Brad, this is our first return trip to America in a while, and coming home from Scotland.
It's been a minute.
It sure has, man.
Yeah, it took a while. We jumped on the boat in England. We've been hanging out in the ocean, drinking scotch for a while.
We were in Wales for a while this year. Like
we were in Wales.
We've been all over.
Dude, I gotta say, out of all like the European countries, I don't know a single thing about Wales.
You know what? I respect that. They're flying under the radar. They're like
they are.
They're like, direct your hatred towards these other three countries in the UK.
Yeah.
Leave us alone. We're going to make Penderyn and just go away. You can't pronounce any of our cities' names, and we would have it that way forever.
Yeah. Oh, man. Bob, I'm excited to drink this Woodford wheat. Now, Woodford produced this in an effort to finish their lineup of like 4 whiskeys that represent the original 4 American whiskeys, Bob.
Like the different grains that can be used in whiskeys. Yeah. So they have Woodford bourbon, and they expanded to Woodford rye, and then Woodford malt, and now they're like, you know what? We should have a wheat whiskey. So this one clocks in, as most of their products do, at 90.4 proof. It is non-age stated, which we know means it's at least 4 years old.
What do you think decided on the 0.4?
I don't know.
Like F90.
We gotta
get that.
We gotta get Chris Morris back on here. Be like,
oh, that's a good idea.
So the mash bill on this, Brad, is only 52% wheat, and then the next highest is 20% malted barley, 20% corn, 8% rye. So it is a 4-grain whiskey, but only just barely qualifies as a wheat whiskey. I'm pretty excited to jump into this, man. Let's dive right in. What are you picking up on the nose?
I believe there was this song in the 90s called Peaches, or is it Peach Country? Georgia Peaches?
I was thinking of that really dirty song, Peaches and Cream. That's what I was thinking of.
Millions of Peaches.
Millions of Peaches. That's the one. Sure.
That's it. Yeah, Millions of Peaches. Bob, I smell so many peaches on this. There's a little bit of hay, a little bit of vanilla, kind of a straw type of aroma going on. It's unique. It's interesting. I'll give it a 7.
Yeah, the hay is a really good note because it definitely smells like barn to me. You know what I mean? Like, it's real dusty, and I like that a lot. This is a note I've been getting on a lot of whiskeys lately, and I'm digging it. And I tried this whiskey alongside my wife, and we just shared the glass. I'm just realizing that I really like wheat whiskeys, and I really like wheated bourbons, and those are just kind of my wheelhouse. The further we get into this whiskey drinking endeavor, Brad, more than a high rye bourbon, I would rather have a wheated bourbon. And so wheat whiskeys are like right up my alley. This one did have quite a bit of ethanol to me on the nose, like surprisingly more than I expected. but it has
it's that 0.4, man.
It's that 0.4. Chris Morris working his magic. But it has a lot of promise. I'm going to give it a 7 on the nose.
Yeah, and then we get into the palate. For me, I'm gonna sound like I'm just repeating myself. It feels like it's like canned peaches, fresh straw, and little hints of vanilla that keep hitting you. I don't know if I've ever had a whiskey that literally just stayed the exact same from the nose to the palate. Like nothing changed on this.
Talk about consistency.
Yeah, it's incredibly consistent. It's not necessarily a flavor I'm like crazy pumped about. It's fine. It's solid. I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10.
I actually started liking this more and more the further along I got into the tasting. And it started here. When I first took a sip, it's really thin on the tip of your tongue. I was thinking to myself that it was going to be really, really thin. And then it hit kind of the mid palate and it was very syrupy. Like really thick. And I was like, oh, all right, cool. There's that viscosity that we know and love. And then I went to swallow and it was thin again. So I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on here. It was all over the place. It was spicy, but it wasn't harsh. So that alcohol from the nose was not so much present on the palate. It had a really standard kind of wheat whiskey palate. We've had a couple like wheat whiskeys and wheated bourbons on the show before, and it was all there. Like that really nice, almost like cola effervescence that you get sometimes from a wheat whiskey. It was there, but it also had a layer of caramel to it and peanut butter. And so it was kind of like drinking not so much a wheated bourbon, but a wheat whiskey that they like somehow extracted the most bourbon-y flavors into. Really, really good. I'm going to give it an 8.5 on the palate.
Yeah, man, I'm not in the same place as you. When I get to the finish, it turns into a Woodford whiskey again. It gets really nice and oaky. There's just a hint of that peach left over that's still staying all through. And it really ends with some nice spices. I liked the finish a little bit more than I did the rest of the experience. I'll give it a 7.5 on the finish.
I'm going to go ahead and give it an 8.5 on the finish again. It really became a wheat whiskey on the finish for me. I had cherry cola, and that's something that we've gotten a lot on our wheated bourbons and our wheat whiskeys, and sawdust. Like that dustiness came back again. I really loved it. So it's an 8.5 on the finish. When it comes to balance, I'm also going to give it an 8.5. The only thing that would prevent it from being higher was that I did get that little bit of like astringency on the nose, but thankfully that wasn't there on the palate or on the finish. So I'm coming out like pretty high on this one, Brad.
Yeah, I'm not there with you.
Right.
I will say though, on the balance, this is incredibly balanced. For me, you really got that really strong peach and, like you said, like a dusty hay barn feel throughout the entire nose, palate, and finish. I'll give it an 8 out of 10 on the balance. I think it's really well balanced.
All right, and then when it comes to value, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. And the only reason is there's a whiskey called Bernheim wheat whiskey that is made by Heaven Hill that markets for around $20 to $25. And it's pretty comparable to this. I actually think I prefer this one, but I don't know if I would say that it's worth almost 50% more than you can get with Bernheim. So I'm going to give it an 8. I actually plan to pick up a bottle of this sometime soon. I liked this a lot, Brad. And like I said, it's right in my wheelhouse, so I'm kind of like conditioned to like this. But I am coming out here to a 40.5 out of 50. Brad, what is your value score, and then what are you coming out to?
Yeah, see, at $36, I don't think this is a bad value. I think it is a unique and a really solid offering by Woodford. It's fun and interesting. I'll give it a 6 out of 10 on the value. I just personally am not vibing with it quite as much to give it a higher score. But my total score is coming out to that magic number, Bob. A 35 out of 50. The golden ratio, if you will.
Well, that puts us at a 75.5 out of 100, or a 37.75 out of 50. I would recommend trying it for sure, and I would also recommend buying a bottle. Brad, I have a feeling you're not going to be quite there with me.
Yeah, I would say try it. If you have a friend that's willing to pour you a dram, go for it. I don't know if I'd recommend a bottle. I think I'd say hold back on that.
Well, we would like to know what you think. If you've had Woodford wheat, if you're a fan of wheat whiskey, reach out to us and let us know. Put one of us in our place while we get back into talking about Arrival. Brad, what do you say?
Let's get to it. Alrighty, everybody, that was Woodford Wheat.
That was like Bruce Buffer. That was man.
Yeah, today we're talking about Arrival, Bob. It's a movie that I'm pretty big on. You don't seem quite as big on.
Nope.
But that can all be shoved to the side because we have the greatest segment ever invented in the history of podcast segments.
And what is that, Brad?
You know what it is, Bob? It's 2 facts and a falsehood.
2 facts and a falsehood, where the game's made up and the points don't matter. Because
that is right.
Because Brad has had to retract at least 3 of his points and make them into ties. I don't even know what the score is at this point, Brad.
I've only retracted twice. Thank you very much.
You've retracted twice, but you've been proven wrong 3 times. So
that is a false statement, Bob. I have not looked up the 3rd accusation, and I am innocent until proven guilty.
Innocent until you look it up. So as long as you don't look it
right.
up, you can never be guilty. Remember that, kids.
So, Arrival, fact number 1, this was the only Best Picture Oscar nominee
that year? That's false.
That's it.
I think there were 10.
Fact number 1, this is the only Best Picture nominee that did not have any nominations in the Best Acting not just the Best Acting, any of the acting categories.
So you're saying for its year?
For its year.
Okay.
It was the only, yes, of all time, the only Best Picture.
Ever.
Yeah, ever. Nope, just of its year. That would be the 2017 Oscars, I believe. Fact number 2. In Arrival, Forrest Whitaker plays a military officer who recruits civilian experts with special skills to assist with the first contact of the alien species. Did you know that he also played, in 1995's Species, a civilian expert with a special skill who was recruited to assist with the first contact of an alien species?
Nice.
All right. Also, Jeremy Renner played a very similar character in his first movie appearance, 2001's Fish in a Barrel, in which he was a scientist who theorizes what aliens want with humans when they make first contact.
I don't freaking know, man. Oh, this is... It's way harder to do this when it's a movie I don't care about.
It's kind of like doing Brad Explains with a movie I don't like.
So the movie Species, I've never seen it, but I remember as a small child the video cover at the video store, and I remember feeling like, "Ooh, I shouldn't be seeing this right now." It was a very erotic thing.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Now I need to look up the cover to
it's just an attractive woman who's playing an alien, but I remember being like, whoa.
As like a 4.5-year-old, you were like, ooh.
I was like, hey,
can't watch that.
Species. Keep you on the back burner until I'm old enough.
You know what movie was like that for me as a kid?
What's that?
Like, this is me being raw and honest. American Beauty.
Oh, yeah, because of the rose petals on the cover.
You can't tell me that cover was not the most erotic thing at Blockbuster.
I just remember seeing it for years and being like, what is that movie about? Like,
yeah.
Under what circumstances would someone be bathing in rose petals? That's right. So many roses. How did they get in this predicament? Like, we're so off base. Okay, I don't know if Forrest Whitaker's in Species because I've only ever seen the cover, and he is not that woman. So 2 might be true. 3 might be true because I don't know enough about Jeremy Renner to know what Fish in a Barrel is. Number 1, it was the year that Emma Stone won the Oscar. But did she beat Amy Adams? If anyone was nominated, it was Amy Adams. And Amy Adams has been criminally neglected by the Academy and on many occasions not even nominated when people were like, oh, she should have won that year. So I can't remember if that was an Amy Adams nomination year or not. And that's what's really screwing this whole thing up for me. What other movies were up for Best Picture that year? Moonlight, that had a nomination and a win.
Wait, Moonlight won?
Oh no, Moonlight was 17, wasn't it? And this was 16. What won in 2016? The Shape of Water? No, that was 2018. God, time. What is time? Am I right?
Arrival. Thought that Moonlight lost to La La Land.
No, La La Land lost to Moonlight. That was the one that they announced. And then...
Yeah, I remember.
I'm sorry. No. Yeah. All right, Brad, I'm just going to go ahead and say Jeremy Renner is the falsehood.
Jeremy Renner is the falsehood, Bob.
Hey, I did it.
You did it.
Oh, my gosh.
His first movie was Fish in a Barrel, but I have zero clue what that movie was about.
Yeah. Wow. That was the longest two facts and a falsehood ever.
It was. I'll tell you this. The cover line for Fish in a Barrel was something to the effect of like, you thought you saw it all with Reservoir Dogs, ... Fish in a Barrel.
Ooh. What a horrible name for a movie.
Yeah.
Like, no one's going to take
terrible.
that movie seriously.
It's terrible. It's got like a 4.8 on IMDb.
Beautiful.
So we'll do it with our next bad movie bonus. Bob, I want to get into Arrival because, not that we haven't gotten into it already, I want to hear your nitpicks because I think that this is like a really solid movie, and I'm gonna position you to defend me here. I think that this is the kind of movie that we're missing out on in modern Hollywood. Because like they won't take chances on like interesting, unique twists on the sci-fi genre or anything that's not going to be a blockbuster. I feel like Arrival would be a casualty of the MCU-ification that we've seen since 2015-16.
I think that it does a couple things really well, like to your point, in that it is a very intimate story that's told on a pretty, big scale in terms of like thematically, right? It's about an alien invasion, but it's really just about one person. And it is also a really high concept drama. Like they don't make movies like this anymore. And I remember a few years ago, I went with a buddy to a preview screening of the movie Annihilation, which is a hard sci-fi movie and based on prior IP, but didn't do great at the box office. And it has some similarities to this movie in that it's like it has that impending sense of dread for a long time. And that one tips way more into horror. But that, again, it's like a really high concept movie. And you don't see that a ton. So you're right. I think they need to make more movies in the vein of Arrival. I just don't know that this is the movie they needed to make.
Well, why is that, Bob? What is sticking in your craw?
Well, so I'll say this, like, I don't hate this movie. It's made by people I love and respect. And again, I respect the effort, but I think earlier I talked about how there were two movies that it really reminded me of, and one is Interstellar, and the other would be one we watched earlier this year, and that would be Signs, because obviously, alien invasion movie about a family, right? It's a very intimate story set against the backdrop of an alien invasion. So they were two very obvious parallels, but I think that most of my nitpicks with this movie fall back on the fact that, like, the interstellar parts of this movie are all done as well or better in Interstellar. And the family, intimate drama parts of this movie are all done better in Signs. And I can't really think of a lot of areas where this movie does anything better than another movie I could point to. And that really, like, that's a huge oversimplification of this movie. But I think at the end of the day, this is a movie that I don't quite know what the message of the movie is, or I don't know what it wants to be or what it wants to say. And for a long time, it seems like this is a movie about how do we communicate? Like, how do humans communicate with each other? We need to learn how to work together. And these aliens are showing us that. And of course, the US and China are going to hide all their secrets. And, it becomes a movie about collaboration and cooperation. And, it has interesting ideas in that realm. And Interstellar kind of touched on some of that as well. And I think that would have been a really cool point to make and make that the main point of the movie. And then it really veers into this like, nope, it's a time travel movie now. And the point of the time travel movie is this, like, if you could know the future and the future had bad shit in it for you, like, would you still do it? But if I understand the contours of the movie correctly, I don't really know if she had any choice. It wasn't like they gave her an option of like, do you want to see the future? Because then your kid's going to die. It was just like, you do see the future. Also, your kid's going to die. Deal with this knowledge. And so there wasn't really any stakes there. So that didn't really have any like dramatic tension for me. And it wasn't really a movie about like a mother's love or a mother's determination, because again, it was just kind of dealing with things as they come. And so I thought maybe it's a movie about like fate and how do you deal with knowing your own fate, but it didn't get into that enough either. So it was just kind of like a movie with a bunch of underdeveloped ideas, and they were all good ideas, but it didn't lean into any one of them enough. That's my rant. It's not really a rant. It's just like, I just don't think it like fully grasped any one of those concepts to the extent it needed to like hit a home run for me.
Yeah. See, I think for me, the core message of the movie is that human relationship is based on communication, and human relationship is worth pursuing no matter what the cost. That, like, if I had to just boil it down, I think that was the message of this movie. Mm-hmm. That in order to advance as a race, as a civilization, we need to pursue human connection. Because in the end, what kept the war from happening, what kept China from doing it, wasn't necessarily, the U.S. offering some strategic advantage or, using some form of diplomacy. It was an interpersonal relationship that was formed by, Amy Adams' character to the Chinese general who was, kind of in charge of what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And it was her reaching out to him and bonding with him over something he was vulnerable about. That is what drew them together. And I think that's a really powerful message. And I look at our world now, 2022, 6 years after this movie came out, and in my mind, I'm like, man, I think that we could use more of that message, that human connection is worth it. Even if the outcome might seem negative in the world's eyes, her child dies in the end, the connection and the bond that she made with her child was still incredibly important.
Sure.
I will say, I was reading about the movie, and the source material is a book written in the 90s by a guy named Ted Chiang. And in the book, she sees the future and her daughter dying in the future, but the daughter dying in the future is an avoidable accident. She dies like rock climbing or something.
Huh.
And that feels a lot darker to me.
Yeah, but it also gives the movie stakes that I feel like it doesn't have. Like, there are just no real stakes here. It's not even as if they're like, the aliens come and they say like, hey, in 3,000 years, we're really going to need your help. And if you don't do this, we can't get humanity's help. They just say like, in 3,000 years, we're going to need the help of humanity. This is how it happens. And like, there's a sense of inevitability with it that it's almost like she doesn't have to take on any sort of mantle or make any sort of sacrifice or make any sort of decision. She just becomes aware of things that are beyond her control that are going to happen. And like, even the idea of like humanity was going to launch a war against the aliens, I don't really think that we had any indication that the aliens were ever going to retaliate. You know what I mean? Like, we could have launched missiles at them, but like maybe they just fly away.
Was it going to be an Iron Giant situation?
I don't see. And that's the thing, is like, we don't know. And I think the aliens were so benevolent that, even like when they tried to get bombed, they pushed Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner out of the ship. Like, no, you guys be safe. So like, I never felt like there were any stakes to this movie, and giving her some sort of a decision to make really would have helped out and made all of the rest of the stuff more impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the decision she made was to still have her child.
But could she have avoided that? Like, was it just an inevitability? And that's the thing, is like, I feel like of all the time travel movies we've watched, this is the one where the logic of the time travel falls apart the easiest. So like, it hinges on this conversation she has with the with the Chinese general, like a year and a half later. And he tells her in the future that he had a conversation with her in the past, and he shows her a phone number. And so then, because she can see the future from the past, she sees the phone number, she knows to call the general, and she stops this war from happening. But like, they show the full scene play out in the future where she doesn't know the general. Like, he approaches her and she's confused and he has to explain to her. But like, then once it happens in the past, she would remember it. And so that future is like, it gets into this, like, everything falls apart And unless you're going to open up the concept of like weird multiverses and stuff, like it's not worth thinking about. But it's also kind of like, if you give this movie 5 seconds worth of thought, I feel like all it falls apart.
Man, I don't think I'm with you. I think that there's a reality where she's, I don't want to reference another movie. I feel like she's kind of shifting back and forth and this is like the nerdy time travel side. I think that she in the current present is shifting back and forth between her realities and struggling to understand where she's at. Whereas like the next time she goes through that reality, she might not be going through that. Or it could just be like kind of a loop where every time she meets the general there, she kind of loops back to what's happening in the past.
Just stuck in an endless loop of watching your kid die and meeting a Chinese guy.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's ridiculous.
Life. Am I right?
Am I right?
All right, dude. Let's give some final scores here. Brad, here's the thing is like, I don't hate this movie, and I don't think it's a bad movie. It just never clicks, and it never works for me. And I'd be lying if I thought it was better than a 6. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Like, it seems harsh. Yeah, it does. Like, it seems harsh, and I don't dislike it at all. And I love Denis Villeneuve, and I'll watch Amy Adams do absolutely anything. So that's not an issue. But yeah, it's just, it didn't work for me in the theater. I was excited to revisit it, and it just kind of confirmed to me that it still doesn't work. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, 6 is pretty harsh. I think I'll give it an 8 out of 10. This is one of the few times where I think IMDb is like right on the money. It has it at a 7.9. And for me, I'm right there with it. It's a solid movie that is entertaining and fun and interesting. It jogs the brain. We didn't really get into it, but I think that the alien design is really interesting.
Oh, for
cool.
sure. Yep.
I think that there's a lot of elements of this film that are grounded and interesting. And I'm in, dude. I don't think it's the best sci-fi movie of all time. The fact that it was one of the first sci-fi movies nominated for Best Picture in a long, long time was cool, but maybe a little overstated. I don't know if it deserved.
Yeah.
But we're putting 10 movies in there. Why not put Arrival in?
Oh, one more thing before we sign off for the day.
Yeah.
What was going on with Forrest Whitaker in this movie? Because was he supposed to be like from Boston? Like, what was the accent he was trying to do?
Bob, here's the thing. I don't think you could ever not make that statement about Forrest Whitaker in any movie. I've never understood him as an actor in any movie.
He's a good actor, but like he just makes choices, you know?
Exactly. That's what I don't understand with Forrest Whitaker. Honestly, a movie that I liked him in was a Netflix movie about like basically like a World War III where you don't see World War III happen. Did you ever watch this?
Nope.
It was Forrest Whitaker and I don't remember. It was a Netflix movie that I was like really pleasantly surprised by. But other than that, I felt this way in Rogue One with Forrest Whitaker. I felt this way in Arrival. I'm with you, dude. I don't know what he's really doing in this movie.
I could not understand a word he said in this movie. Like I had to turn on, like the only two things in this movie that needed subtitled were alien creatures and Forrest Whitaker. All right, man. Next week, we are going to be watching another Jason Reitman movie, another kind of dark comedy. I've been excited to talk about this one for a long time because I have no idea where you're going to fall on it. It's a movie called Young Adult, so I'm pumped. We're going to watch that next week. But until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.